Well, hello and a happy new year. So, today I thought we would continue our conversation on Seneca and his moral letters and go over the 18th letter. And just like before, I'll select part of that letter. And I thought that this was really rather appropriate given the timing. From Seneca to Lucilius, greetings. The month is December and the city is sweating more than ever. License has been granted to public self-indulgence, and everywhere is a great din of preparations, just as if there were some real difference between a day of Saturnalia and a business day. But really there is not a bit of difference, so that I agree entirely with the one who said that what used to be a month of December is now the entire year. If I had you here, I'd like to ask your opinion on what our behavior should be. Should we make no alteration at all in our daily routine, or should we try not to appear at odds with the general custom, and so make our dinners more festive than usual, laying aside the toga? For what never used to happen except in some time of turmoil, some crisis of the state, we now do for pleasure because of the holiday. We alter our mode of dress. And he goes on to describe here some of the things that you can do to kind of counter the effects of all that feasting and partying. And the advice that he gives Lucilius is to do something like eat dry bread for a day or a couple of days, sleep on a very hard, rigid, basic bed, just use a simple blanket, just kind of deprive yourself of luxuries. It's interesting because the feast of December that's being referred to here is the Saturnalia, feast in honor of Saturn, and that used to be a one-day event in ancient Rome, and then it kind of was expanded to a point where it was multiple days. And this made me think about a lot of things, because it's January when this video goes up, but the reality is this is recorded in December, because I always try to record some stuff in advance. So now that as I'm recording this, it's actually December 2nd today. So the whole December craze, I'm not trying to sound judgmental, but you know, the whole hurly-burly is not quite done. It's in full swing. It's really actually starting and starting to be in full swing. So I got a haircut today. Obviously looks amazing. But having said that, I went to a barber in a mall, and it's Christmas. There's Christmas decorations. There is some sort of Santa station set up. There is Christmas music was being played, etc. What I'm trying to get at is I remember the days of old when indeed Christmas would really start in shops and such early December. But I mean, to be fair, I started to notice things being set up in November, maybe even the end of October, right when Thanksgiving is done. Then everything moves to Christmas. And I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. I mean, we see the same thing in the Netherlands. We used to not really celebrate Christmas. We just had our own feast, the Feast of St. Nicholas. And that associated with that a specific candy, the types of candy, sweets as it were. And those used to be in the shops, late November, but then it started to be October, and I think some places you can already get them in September now. So what I find absolutely fascinating is that throughout history, right, these things just repeat themselves. Seneca is first 2 centuries after Christ, I think. So this goes back a very long time. You're talking about ancient civilization. And we're still doing it now. We're doing the exact same thing. You have some sort of feast, and you kind of expand it little by little until it becomes more and more and more of a thing, a bigger thing, and everybody indulges. Speaking of which, let me have a sip. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I suppose as long as you're not really bothering anyone, I don't think it's anything wrong with this. I also don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with having, say, Christmas candy in the shops in November. I don't think there's an objective flaw or error here. But having said all this, just my fascination with that same pattern being repeated through the centuries and centuries, could almost say millennia. But what I also find interesting is the idea of, so what do you do? Because that seems to be what Seneca is asking Lucilius. So what do you do? Do you fully indulge or not? And if you do you compensate by maybe also giving yourself some days where you live in more or less poverty? Remember, Seneca was a millionaire, so it's easy to say, right? But anyway, what do you do? Do you compensate for indulgence by also then toning it down, or do you not? Something I think that's interesting about Christmas is that to me it's always felt, kind of irrespective of where you stand on Christmas from a religious viewpoint, there's something in the air. There's something going on, and people do things with friends and family and all that kind of stuff, which is all great. But what makes it special, and what do you do, right? Is this a time where you really should have 4 pounds of chocolate a day and a turkey and etc.? I think if you try to approach this from a Stoic viewpoint, the answer is no, because all that stuff, the candy and the somewhat extravagant food, all that stuff is preferred indifference. It's things that you could consume, but they, at the end of the day, do not contribute towards being virtuous. You just consume them, right? But should you? Well, I mean, I don't think there's anything, again, necessarily wrong with splurging a bit and maybe eating some more luxurious things than you usually would. But I like Seneca's idea of, but then also try to balance that out by preparing yourself for hardships. Maybe also go on just bread and water for a single day. He says 2 or 3 days, maybe even. But to also make sure that you don't indulge yourself to such a degree that you get accustomed to a certain level of luxury, which then later you don't have anymore. Or may not have anymore. You never know what will happen, right, in life. And I think it's a very interesting viewpoint, because I kind of like that idea. Now, just like going on bread and water sounds like a very harsh way to do it, but taking a day to also kind of bounce back from all the extravagant food and such, I don't think that's a bad idea. The other thing, and that was kind of the final thing I wanted to bring up, is also bear in mind that in a Christmas period, you can also take a step back and recover mentally. A lot of strain is put on us, and we put a lot of strain on ourselves around the December month of, we have to entertain guests and be with guests and hang out with people and have dinners together, and you kind of have to be on all the time. You have to talk, and you have to be festive and chatty and all that stuff. And that's not always easy. So I think that balancing out your whole physical stuff after all the fancy meals and such, that's a great idea. But I think you should also try and take time. We should also try and take time to balance ourselves out mentally. See what is required mentally to recover from the busy holidays, to take a step back, to take it easy and kind of go on a mental diet, right? Where you mentally bounce back and you take some time for yourself to recover, to do some of the things that you like to do without having the pressure from others who want to join in and do this and that and all the other together. I think that's important too. And I think that would also be a very Stoic thing to do. Taking care of your mind, your mental health is important as well. These were the thoughts I had reading this letter. What do you do? What do you do to balance out after busy holidays? What do you do? How do you do it? Any particular things you pursue, or what's your ideas in this letter in general? It's always interesting to read. I'll be back again next week. I hope this was useful, and I'll gladly see you later. Bye-bye.